Good afternoon. What's going on there, guys? It is the Earthmaster here on the live stream on this beautiful Monday. It is October 3rd, 2022, about 12:58 p.m. California time. Latest quake shows a 1.6 earthquake on the globe. I am back from a little touring around Texas and the Gulf Coast area. I know the stream went down here a couple days ago. Fired it up back last night when I got home from the airport. And told everyone I was going to bed. Someone must have been listening to me because they looks like they pulled the plug again about 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning on me. So the stream was only up for like an hour and a half before someone decided to pull the plug on me again. So that's all right. I did notice it when I got up to use the bathroom real quick and added it back up. All right, so what do we got for earthquake activity? As noted, a 1.6 there in California. Let's go ahead and check out the latest activity here around the globe. And we'll check out space weather activity here in just a little bit. A lot of people asking questions about the solar flare potential and also the effects that would happen here on Earth if we should get a large one. Okay, so let's look at earthquake activity first. See what we got. We're still seeing some movement out here in the northern Atlantic Ocean around the Charlie Gibbs fracture zone. That's the area that's seen probably roughly over 100 earthquakes over the last week and a half, 2 weeks or so in this area of the Atlantic Ocean. It is a divergent boundary. It looks like it's calmed down a little bit, but we're still seeing some activity out there. 5.2, the latest there within the last 24 hours. Still kind of watching that region. The Puerto Rico area around the Caribbean plate here, the Puerto Rico Trench, seeing a little trail of activity up around the Puerto Rico Trench area. That is kind of kicking up there around that region that I kind of like to keep an eye on. Right now, only a handful of earthquakes up there, but whenever we see swarming up around the Puerto Rico Trench, that could be a good indicator of possibly something getting ready to brew in that region far as larger earthquake activity goes. South America up into the Peru area and Ecuador. Seen a couple earthquakes. These here, it looks like one of those are from this morning time frame, a 4.4, about 47 kilometers deep here into the northern end of the Peru-Chile Trench and the Ecuador Trench up here. The majority of these other earthquakes are older from yesterday. Did see some movement out here in the East Pacific Rise near the Easter Island region. Southern California rocking and rolling a little bit on the Pacific side of the plate boundary. Did see some earthquake activity last night and also this morning too. Seen a 3.0 up against the San Andreas Fault on the, let's see which fault system that is. What is that? Hold on a second here, stand by. Cherry Valley Fault looks like. Little fault system. There's this area here on the western side of the plate boundary is a zone that gets a lot of crunching, so to speak. I guess that's a word I like to use. Many different fault segments here, even more than what's shown up here on the map. And it's right up against the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. A lot of times when I see that movement brushing up against there, kind of means that things are probably getting ready to increase further on the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. We haven't really seen too much activity. Let's bring up the all magnitudes here. On the San Andreas Fault itself here, most of it has been on the Pacific side on the adjacent fault systems here that run kind of parallel with the San Andreas Fault. And a little activity on the North American side of the plate boundary as well. Looks like just a couple small microquakes. But overall, seismic activity has been increasing over the last day and today's time frame along the west coast. Specifically, if you look all the way up north here along the plate boundary itself into the central portion of the San Andreas Fault, the creeping segment, seen some earthquakes light up here within the last hour. Also offshore, this is a very odd earthquake. A 1.6 off of the San Andreas Fault, off of the coast of the Point Arena area. I'm not for certain if this has been reviewed. It has, so that has stuck. In that for that earthquake. Like I say, I don't recall too much earthquake activity being offshore, off on the Pacific plate here from this plate boundary. It's a little odd. And like I say, we look at these things every single day, hours at a time. And it's been going on for quite a few years, and it's just a little odd earthquake out there. What it means, I don't know. I guess it's not uncommon to get some movement out there in the Pacific Plate area itself. It is pretty shallow, 4.3 kilometers for a 1.6. But overall, along with this earthquake and the others down here, might want to watch the West Coast today. Nevada, 3.1 out there in the desert of Nevada, the Pacific Northwest. Couple small microquakes around Mount St. Helens, and some movement up into the Wyoming area. Yellowstone, we'll go ahead and check this out just real quick because I always like to check Yellowstone, right? Looks like they have updated their certificate there. Far as the timestamp goes, I'm not getting any hazardous warning from my virus system saying that this is a potential hazard. So sometimes it happens. I do enjoy this site. It's called isthisthingOn.org, and I have donated to these folks before when they ask for donations because I utilize their site quite often for data, earthquake activity on a kind of a pretty cool map. You can go to any one of these individually seismograph stations from the University of Utah and check them out, but I like the way that this is presented here on the map. Earthquake activity, there is still some continuing overnight and also this morning time frame, seen some microquakes. This has been an ongoing thing here for a little bit over a month. I did put out an article on my Facebook page from the USGS, and they talk about how groundwater snow melt in the spring and summer. You know, the massive rains that they've gotten up there recently. It kind of percolates down into the ground, and it takes a little while for that water to get down there where it's a little warm, right? It's a little hot. You got the magma below there heating things up. Well, that water and whatnot kind of swells the ground a little bit and interacting with the heat below, well below. It's some pretty shallow, but it takes maybe a few weeks, even sometimes a couple months for this snow melt and water to reach down there. And they kind of chat about how it can kick up swarms and swelling of the land. Check it out. It's a pretty cool article. Not going to go into all of it right now because there's a lot to chat about. But either way, an ongoing minor earthquake swarm here over the last 30 days. They're confined to the northwest corner of the park. And they have listed, looks like they listed a couple this morning. There's definitely been a lot more over the last 24 hours, but hey, they decided to throw up 5 and call it good. All right, at least they're getting something out there. All right, further south, some movement into the beautiful state of Texas. I enjoyed the visit out there, by the way. Stayed a lot down here along the Gulf Coast, went into Louisiana, had some good Cajun food, Missy Mimi's favorite. A little spicy for me. I'm more of a barbecue and greasy rib type of guy. But it was good. The gumbo, I can't remember what it is, some type of gumbo, shrimp gumbo, but it was spicy. Outside of Midland, Big Spring area, looks like a couple earthquakes overnight. Actually, those are from yesterday. Oklahoma, though, getting in on some activity in the last hour. It looks like a little swarm north of the Kingfisher area. You guys will take a guess at what's out there? Let's go ahead and check it out. I know there's some beautiful back roads, but there's also, I'm sure, a few oil operations going on out there, and you guys know what they look like, right? If we zoom in, if you zoom out, one might think, wow, those are some pretty cool farmhouses out there. You know, a lot of houses out here in this community. Well, no, they're not. These are oil houses, so to speak. These are, and this one here looks older. Not a whole lot of operations consisting on it, but at one point there was injection of wastewater and oil drilling out here in this region. Looks like maybe some of these are still operational. But a lot of these look older, and these earthquakes pop up a lot in these oil fields, and there is a relation to them between earthquakes and the drilling itself and the injection of wastewater. It's definitely been looked at and proven to an extent. All right, let's back out of here. See what else we got. A little bit of movement into the state of Kansas up there as well. Eastern portion of the country looks pretty quiet right now. Not a whole lot going on. Let's see, we kind of made a little loop-de-loop here. The big island of Hawaii, I don't want to skip this one because we're still seeing an ongoing swarm there at the Mauna Loa volcano. This has been ongoing for a little while as well. If we look at the last 7 days of earthquake activity, we've seen kind of much two separate different swarms up here at Mauna Loa. one consisting of a linear type fashion of very shallow earthquake movement. And to the west here, a little cluster confined to this, looks like the western flank here of Mauna Loa, confined to deeper movement. Earthquake activity happening much deeper here on this side of the volcano. Down below, something brewing, I think, and much shallower earthquake activity towards the summit region. So what it all means, I don't know. It's something to watch pretty closely. All I know is I think this thing's going to be getting active soon, so we will continue to monitor that. Let's see if the HANS notification system has been put out yet. See if they've updated anything from the HVO. A lot of times they will, but it looks like we're going to have to wait for their weekly update on Mauna Loa because there's no important updates or advisories being put out on the activity at Mauna Loa. So we'll wait to see what they have to say. But either way, some activity occurring overnight and also down here around the Pahala area. That's down here on the southeastern flank of the Big Island. Alaska pretty quiet as far as the Aleutian Trench goes. Up north, though, into Anchorage and Fairbanks, Denali, all very typical movement. 2.5 map and above shows a handful of quakes up there, including a 4.2 just outside the Cook Inlet area yesterday, and some movement south of Anchorage, the most recent 3.0 in the area of the Pacific Plate and the North American subduction zone. Activity further west kind of dying off a little bit. The Mariana Trench, Izu Trench, all quiet, it looks like today. Tonga Trench did see some movement late last night. Looks like a 4.3. And see what we got for recent activity. It looks like the most recent one was a 4.5. South of the Philippines, it looks like into the Philippine Trench at 127 kilometers deep. So I wouldn't doubt it with this deeper cluster of quakes down there to potentially watch upstream here, up around the locked area for some further movement. We haven't seen it yet today. This 5.0 was much prior to the deeper movement and on a separate section of the Philippine Trench, but we've got to watch out there with that deeper movement. Himalayas, Afghanistan, a couple small earthquakes going on out there, including some 4s. South Sandwich Trench seen another 5.5. Looks like we got Chile. No. What do we got here? Argentina region seen a 4.4 just coming in here onto the earthquake map at looks like 226 kilometers deep. Pretty deep earthquake into the Peru-Chile Trench. All right, let's chat about space weather real quick. Let's bring up, there's a couple different websites I use, and I always try to make sure that I include links to these folks because I do appreciate the whole solarham.net website. And in fact, I've donated to these folks too because I utilize their data quite a bit. Any of this data you can find publicly throughout Space Weather Prediction Center, NASA, NOAA website. This is all information publicly available. These people just put it on their website in a pretty cool, decent format, and I like the layout. That's why I use this site a lot, and that's why I've donated in the past before to these folks. So I appreciate the solarham.net website. Data right now, the latest solar flare detection chart. When you click on this, notice the link up here. It goes to the Space Weather Prediction Center.noaa.gov. Anyone can find it. It's all publicly available info, folks. And as far as reading it goes, the X flare category, far as the X flare class, consists over here on the right side of the screen. Here is peak intensity over here to the left if you're into the numbers. And over the last 24 hours or so, following the X 1.1 we seen yesterday, things have still been popping, so to speak. We've gotten a couple M flares, some stronger M flares as well. Looks like we're dwindling down a tad bit here into the C flare category, but it's popping, meaning that it looks like it's getting ready to flare up a little bit more. And there's a couple different sunspots that we are monitoring. 3112 is a massive sunspot that we have not seen. I believe this is one of the largest ones we've seen in the last couple years. So definitely worth noting. It is in a position as it's growing to be at its maximum potential here once it reaches the Earth's facing direction. If it were to pop off a major X flare, of course, we'd have some R1 or R storms or radiation storms from the flare itself. But as far as any CME, massive CME, we would probably only get a glancing blow because of its current location there on the eastern, kind of on the eastern section of the sun, northeastern limb of the sun, directed somewhat away from Earth. So you got to look at these ones that are kind of facing at least within the bullseye center of the sun to be 100% effective, geo-effective in terms of, well, CMEs and whatnot. Here's the latest imagery. It's going to take a couple days or so for it to be in a bullseye shot, but it is growing, and this thing looks like it's really going to get ready to pop here. A lot of red, blue, all confined here. The magnetic fields, the polarities are very close to each other, and they're growing. So this thing could just pop an X-flare really soon. Going to watch that pretty closely today. If it does, of course, we will provide updates. Another area is to watching here is this one over here along the western side. A lot of mixing complex magnetic fields. Not quite as awesome, I should say, as this, but it's there. We got the potential for some strong M flares. This is the sunspot that did produce the X1.1 earlier yesterday, and a little sunspot down here as well. Looks like not a huge threat, but there is a little bit of flaring threat in that one. Main two ones here are 3112 and 3113, 3110 area. Let's see what these guys have for potentials. Make sure I got the latest data, which I do. 3112 harbors energy for strong X-flare class flares, solar flares. 90% certainty for a flare threat on the C flare category. M flare at 65, and there's the X flare elevated at 25%. And that thing is massive and very complex. It harbors a beta gamma delta class X flare potential right there. So we will watch that continuously today. I do have the solar flare detection chart up on the live stream. Right now, let's see what we got. Stand by for just a second here. I think I need to replace my battery in my mouse. Sometimes it seems like it's going dead. Makes me think the computer is going to freeze up and shut down, but I haven't had that issue recently, which is good news. Although someone didn't like the live stream last night, they pulled it down after only being up for an hour. They knew I would be sleeping. So, but that I'm still trying to figure that out, and I will eventually. I might be rich after I figure out who's doing it, because it will be a major lawsuit to mess with people. All right, there's the X1.1. That was from yesterday. That kicked off from that northwestern sunspot 3110, and that again, that does harbor some potential for some stronger M flares as well. But the main one, 3112, that's the giant one. This big one is lining up, so to speak, and we'll see how this plays out in the next couple days here. It could happen today, it could happen late tonight, tomorrow. Either way, the longer it waits to produce a massive CME or a major X flare and produce something spectacular, I think the longer it waits, the better, because it will be lined up perfectly here. So a lot of folks are asking about, well, what does this mean? I've seen a lot, and I'm sorry I didn't get back to everyone. I was tired last night when I got home. I had to get the live stream up and running, but then I passed out, and then I woke up, seen the stream down, so I had to get it back up again, and then I just went to sleep for a little bit because I've had very minimal sleep. So didn't get back to everyone's comments, but man, I read them. So I'm going to try and cover just a little bit today as far as the questions go. What does it all mean? Well, a lot can take place depending on the solar flare strength, the CME strength, far as if it produces a massive amount of plasma from the sun, and if it's Earth directed or not. Almost certainly, when X flares pop, even if they're the sunspot's not lined up directly with the Earth, we get radiation storms here on Earth, and those radiation storms cause radio blackouts, and that's why they're called an R5 storm, R4 storm. I think I said storm. There we go. Trying to get myself back into the hang of things here, and those can cause quite a bit of issues with folks here on Earth when it comes to high frequency radio communications. There, a lot of folks use that. And a lot of stuff is dependent on it. The radio blackouts on the entire sunlit side of the Earth could last for a number of hours. This results in no HF radio contact with folks out there in the ocean and en route to aviators in this sector. So a lot could take place here. Although that is not the the main thing we would worry about. It would be the massive CME. These radiation storms happen a lot from the flare potential, and it only takes a couple minutes for the radiation storm to kick up here on Earth following a large solar flare. It's the CME that is produced, if it's produced, from an explosion there on the sun, that takes a day or so, a couple days or so, to reach Earth. And when it does, that's when we get into the geomagnetic storms. Those are the ones that can cause further issues. And those are the ones that, that kicked off the Carrington event. Folks, I'm sure you learned about this in school, the 1859 geomagnetic storm. We've seen at least one of those happen since then, but it was not Earth-directed, so we dodged a bullseye hit, so to speak. But either way, this was a very bright solar flare. Some folks saying it was a X40, not for certain on the number, but it did produce a massive Earth-directed CME. It was observed and recorded independently, whatnot. Let's see here. It did cause quite a bit of issues, including some lines on the telegraphs there to catch on fire. A geomagnetic storm of this magnitude occurring today would cause widespread electrical disruptions, blackouts, and damage due to extended outages of the electrical power grid. So there's a lot. We wouldn't fry, okay? It's not like there's a massive CME and it cooks the Earth. We have the magnetic field. We have many different levels of the atmosphere that help us protect it, but to an extent. So if we get that bullseye effect, and we have a lot of stuff up there in space, holy smokes, it seems like space is just a junkyard of technology and satellites up there, and we utilize it. I utilize it for weather, internet, right? We got the Starlink satellites that are up there, and there's a massive amount of them. Anyway, when we get these massive CME events, the big ones, they not only cause communication issues there with the electrical onboard systems of all these satellites and whatnot up there in space, but it also creates drag on the satellites themselves, which could knock them out of orbit and cause them to, well, fall back into the atmosphere. If that is the case, there could be quite the show of shooting stars, so to speak. But I don't think that would be good to have a bunch of satellites and whatnot falling out of the sky. But it's possible if we get a direct bullseye hit like the 1859 Carrington event. There was even a stronger one back in, I believe it was 600 or so, 1,000 or so years prior to this one, that was much stronger. So the potential is there to create havoc here on Earth. But as far as us being cooked, microwaved, it's not going to happen. We would just have some major issues with our way of life when it comes to electronics. I probably wouldn't be here on the live stream. It would probably knock out internet, electricity for quite a while. But there's a whole article, there's books on this event. I think it's worth reading, folks, if you got a few minutes and some further questions about what took place back in the 1800s. But it's pretty crazy. It's really interesting, and it's really a major thought process here. Similar events, here where it talks about similar events and kind of how it missed us and whatnot. But we're not going to be so lucky for forever, right? It's just going to be the perfect right time to be in place. Okay, hold on a second here. Let me go back to the storms here. G5 storm. I don't remember the last time we've seen a G5 storm, to be honest. But if we do, we'll probably see a beautiful, spectacular northern light show here in California, and I'm okay with that. I think I've been wanting to see the northern light. So this G5 storm, which happened to the Carrington event, happened during that cycle, caused widespread voltage control problems, and protective systems problems can occur. That's with today's activity. Some grid systems may experience complete collapse or blackouts. Transformers may experience damage. That's all we need, exploding transformers, right? Spacecraft operations may experience extensive surface charging, problems with orientation, uplink and downlink, and tracking systems. And there's a bunch of other stuff that can happen there with a KP index of 9, which is a G5 solar storm. As far as auroras go, G5 solar geomagnetic storm, auroras have been seen as low as Florida and southern Texas. Woo! Bring it on, right? G4 storms are less likely, but it's been a while since I've seen that as well. And by the way, here's the frequency. One cycle, a solar cycle, equals 11 years. And they're talking here 4 per cycle, 4 days per cycle. So, and that's got to be lined up directly for us to experience these type of issues. Again, we've had similar events such as the Carrington event, but those are misses. They missed us. But like I said, we're not going to be so lucky one of these days. As far as the G4 storm, that's a KP index up of 8, including 9. And those kind of shows here average frequency 100 per cycle. That seems a little high. And then, of course, G3 storms, which we've had recently within the last month or so, or last couple months, and then some smaller storms as we get down to the G1 storms. But the Space Weather Prediction Center, NOAA.gov, NOAA Scales explanation chart is really cool. I would suggest bookmarking this. That way, if stuff comes up where we have like a G5 storm and whatnot, you can go back here and check this out. There's a lot of other stuff here as far as the S5, S4, and talks about some issues when it comes to the satellites that I mentioned here. Satellites may be rendered useless. Memory impacts can cause loss of control, may cause serious noise in the image data. And, you know, all that creates drag on the satellites up there, which could fall to Earth. So, very important graphs here in remembering what these potential storms can do. I will include this link, though, folks, by the way, in the update video description below. All right, let's see here. What else we got? Let's check out the current conditions again once again here on the solar chart. It looks like we're getting a little bit of C flaring kicking up here. And it's not uncommon to see X flares, folks. It's the huge ones, the massive X flares with an Earth-directed massive CME that we would have to worry about. So just a little thought there to keep in mind. But either way, it's very active, and we are headed towards solar maximum here in June or July 2025. So we're peaking out a little bit here, far as the well, we will be peaking here in a couple years, but we're heading up in that direction, and it's pretty cool, folks. There's a lot of different data to look at here, but that's kind of just my explanation for you folks. Hopefully it made a little bit of sense here on these flares. Nothing to worry about far as being cooked, and life in general will go on, even if we have like a Carrington event, but there'll be some issues with electronics and whatnot. Let's see, what else do we have? Looks like we're getting there's some the DRAP map is showing some radio blackouts here centered over the Eastern Pacific right now. And it looks like this guy's starting to flare a little bit once again. That's the second sunspot, the smaller one of the two that I mentioned that's of concern, creating a little flaring right now. And it looks like it's creeping up into the M flare category. It hasn't peaked out yet. Looks like it hasn't been picked up by the GO 16, but it is showing up here on the map into the M flare category. Very minor, but either way, it's just kind of showing you guys how active everything is right now. And that is listed up there on the live stream. That's updates like every 20 seconds, I think, and it's pretty current. If anything does pop off far as a major X flare, Earth-directed CME, I will be jumping on here for an update, and it's definitely worth watching pretty closely, folks, with the elevated X flare potential conditions that is forecasted. We'll be back a little bit later on tonight, folks, with a complete update unless something drastic and major happens. We'll chat you guys in. Peace out.